Hi everyone, thanks for joining this webinar today. The purpose of the webinar is for you to hear from Alpine Fire engineers, one of Mail Manager's new clients. Today we'll be hearing a little bit about their company, what they do, and their experience with emails before and after implementing Mail Manager. So everyone's aware, we generally see this meeting taking around 30 minutes. The idea of the webinar today is meant to be kind of quite a small audience for people that have potentially seen Mail Manager before or are attending on behalf of a colleague. The idea is for you to be able to talk to and kind of hear the experiences of one of our clients. And if you are coming into the meeting today with any questions, please do use the Q&A function in Zoom. Again, thank you for being here. We always find it's really useful for potential customers of ours to hear from a client and get their experience using Mail Manager rather than just hearing it from a salesperson like myself. As a bit of an agenda for today, I'll spend a bit of time at the beginning of the meeting going through the challenges our clients face with emails, but then I'll be handing over to Mark, who will talk to you about Alpine and what life was like before and after implementing Mail Manager. Then at the end of the meeting, we'll go through what the typical implementation process looks like, and we'll also have time for a Q&A as well. In terms of who is going to be part of the meeting today, obviously my role is I'm one of the senior account executives here at Mail Manager, and we're really lucky to have Mark, who is the operations director at Alpine Fire Engineers, join us as well. So to begin with, before we kind of jump into the slides themselves, I'd be really interested to learn a little bit more about why people have joined the meeting today. So what I've just done is I've launched a poll just so people can let us know why they kind of thought it was a good use of their time to join the meeting. I'll leave it up for a few moments and then we can kind of go through the answers. Just give it a little bit more time. Okay, perfect. I'll end the poll there. So in terms of the results as to why people are joining today, there's a pretty even split between debating whether to implement Mail Manager, your current Ideagen customer looking into email management, and there's a few people that are just kind of interested in change management themselves. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks for kind of sharing that information. It's always really useful for us to know the reasons people have joined the meeting today. So before we get started in terms of Alpine's story, we generally like to kind of share some of the key concerns that organizations have relating to email. Sometimes commercially sensitive information isn't shared and it is left in inboxes, which can make it tricky when needing to access it in the future. This can become especially frustrating when people leave the company or go on vacation, as another staff member may need to see a conversation just to understand what's been happening on a project. We see that this becomes really important because 80% of communication in the workplace is via email. Important decisions or changes might be left in one's inboxes, and we generally see that people don't file emails because an email is never deemed as important until you have to go back and find it. We generally see there can be a lack of consistency. You might have someone who's an amazing filer and then someone else who's not quite as good. This lack of consistency can often mean that all relevant project information isn't being logged in a structured fashion. I'll quickly launch a second poll, and this poll is just so that we can understand which of these concerns you see are relevant today to how you're managing emails. And it is a multiple choice. So if there is more than one that you think applies, please do feel free to kind of put more than one answer in. Leave a little bit more time just in case anybody else likes to answer. I'll end the poll there and share the results again. So the main reason that people, or the main concern that people have regarding emails at the moment is if you kind of need to kind of go back and provide evidence on a project. And yeah, we're seeing that construction projects are becoming more litigious. So being able to defend yourself in those scenarios, we can completely understand that being a key concern. And then secondly, removing that wasted time searching for information. Yeah, that can be a real time drain for companies. So in reality, what happens to business emails? We generally see that a needle in a haystack email can be found, but by the point that you found an email, you spent such a large amount of time looking for it when the people that have been doing that searching could be doing fee earning work. Lack of email management may lead to an embarrassing situation with a client if it's taken hours to find one key email, or if a change was made on a project via email and no one was aware of it because it wasn't filed centrally. You may have spent months or longer building a relationship with a client, and that may be tainted if you're unable to present that one crucial email. Then we're seeing that IT managers may have an unnecessarily big workload if they're having to go into staff's inboxes to look for emails, especially now that IT teams are busier than ever due to the pandemic. Lastly, as you all know, emails are often needed to be used as evidence, and then if the dispute arises and the lawyers come knocking at the door, if you're not able to produce those emails, that can certainly be costly for your company. So I'm sure everyone's glad that's everything from me, and I'm sure most of you are keen to hear from Mark. Please keep in mind that we will have time to answer any questions that you may have at the end, so be sure to send them in using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Hugh. Hi, everybody. Just a couple of slides, if you'll indulge us, on who we are. It does tend to lead itself into why we chose Mail Manager. So we've been for 30 years. We provide design, project management, maintenance, active fire suppression systems, specifically sprinkler systems. We've been specialists in logistics and warehousing, so quite large, complex projects. We're LPCB level 4 accredited, which means we can certify our own work, which means we can put a sprinkler system in and pretty much tell you that it'll work. We've grown, well, I'll show you some numbers in a second, but we've grown massively over the last 5 years. A lot of repeat business. We pride ourselves on our exceptional customer service and being able to react quickly, which is a challenge to maintain those kind of things when you're growing. And Mail Manager came in at just the right time, which we'll get onto. If you can do the next slide, please. Thank you. So we do our own in-house sales and estimating. So that's from cradle to grave, basically. But we do, so sales and estimating is done in-house. Prior to that, we've got business development. We do our own design and project management. And then after the project is handed over and finished, we service and support the projects, the site for the next, well, for the lifetime of the site, hopefully. All of which involves a lot of communication, and the standard communication is email. There's Teams, there's Workplace, but the actual the communication method that our clients use is email. So it's important to us that we had a considered approach to how we file our emails. Thanks, you. Next slide, please. So that's just to show where we're at and the kind of growth that we've seen over the last 5 years. In 2018, we took on private equity backing, turnover 14.6 million. And within 5 years, last year we finished the year at 61 million. So quite big growth, as you can appreciate, and headcount to support that growth, and getting the processes in place to be able to keep the values that we have in place and keep the customers happy and keep our technical expertise at a high level and keep ourselves. We're protecting buildings and people against fire, so we need to make sure that all our communications are well documented. We work in the construction sector, so there are many emails flying backwards and forwards about whether it's included in scope or whether it's a variation, and all these things lead to whether you get paid enough at the end of the day and keep us in business. I'm pleased to say that the turnover growth has been supported by commensurate profit growth, so it's not been turnover at the expense of profit. So we must be doing something right, and I've not been paid to say this, but Mail Manager has been really helpful with when we implemented it in smoothing some of that growth. Next slide, please, Hugh. Just a brief note on our circles of culture, if you want to call it that. So some of the values on there really tie into what we're talking about today. So we've got communication, obviously, customer service, teamwork, people focused, continuous improvement. They all tie into how you communicate as a team, even more so these days when you've got remote teams and clients are remote. You're not driving 3 or 4 hours to sit in a room with each other. We still do that because you can't beat that face-to-face communication, but more and more communication is done via Teams, but more via email as well. So it's really key that you control how those emails are filed. Thanks, you. Just to give a bit of a flavour of the kind of size of projects we do, in February of last year, we finished this project for DHL, which was a distribution centre for Mars down at London Gateway, high bay warehouse, 36 metres high, automated, large facility, large amount of sprinkler heads fitted in there, contract value around 5.5 million. You can appreciate for that complex a project that there was a lot of email traffic on there. I think at last count, because I did check before this, we were up to about 6,500 emails on that one project. So all our procurement is done via email. Our commercial communications with the client, design communications, issuing of drawings, all that kind of good stuff is done via email. Okay, cheers, you. So what did we do before Mail Manager? Originally, we had Microsoft public folders. I'm sure some of you on the call will be using the same technology or possibly using the same technology. My understanding, and just to give you a bit of my background, I'm operations, I'm technical when it comes to sprinklers, but I've kind of landed with the IT role as well. So it kind of fell under me to implement the Mail Manager rollout. But my understanding is that Microsoft are withdrawing support from public folders over the next few years, and they're actually really clunky. We'd set up all the folders with various individual folders within the file structure. People would have to go in and manually drag emails into the correct folder. It was quite a time constraint and was really open to error. If you just drag into the wrong place, you'd lost an email. Well, you haven't lost it, but it's really hard to find it if it's gone into the wrong place. And also, you can actually drag the email folders from one point, the public folders from one folder into another public folder. So you actually lose the public folder. So it was really, really clunky and tricky. And because of that, it didn't get done all the time. So there was some people with inboxes with 5,000 emails in them, and that just, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. I'll get round to filing the emails, because it was too difficult. And actually, what we were wanting people to do was make sure that they installed sprinkler systems and that we got paid for it. The actual filing of emails was a secondary or a tertiary concern to them. Although, as Hugh said, it's really important to a business to have that record there, so that if anything, well, not just if it goes wrong, you actually want to have the record to support any claims that you've got for just what you should be paid for in the first place. So we had remote access, manual filing. It began to become a cottage industry. So it was actually taking that much time to file the emails. It's taking more time to file it than it would to write it. And again, I spoke about our rapid company growth. So any difficult processes, again, were overcome because we sometimes struggle to get the resourcing to support that growth. And at the bottom point is key, contractual and safety-led industry. We need to be able to communicate and access the correspondence. So the Mail Manager came along. If you can, next slide, please, Hugh. I had a couple of meetings with Hugh, expecting it to be quite technical and IT driven. It wasn't. It was really simple, to the point where I actually thought Hugh was doing his sales thing, and I thought it can't be this simple. but we had a couple of calls with you, and then we made the decision quite quickly because we were really creaking under the public folder scenario. And we were set up with a couple of calls with a mail manager technician on Teams, who we gave access to our SharePoint site. We made the option, rather than saving on a server, to save in SharePoint, because we want to move to a cloud-based system over the next few years anyways. He set all the scripts up and the startup files for new team members, etc. We did a trial project and then trialed a couple of projects after that, and it became pretty obvious quickly that there weren't really any issues. If there were any issues, it was our misunderstanding of how we'd set the thing up, and we had some really good support from Mail Manager. And then within about 3 months, I think we'd fully rolled it out across all project design and support teams. So that was proposals, commercial, and procurement. Our finance team don't generally use it, but because they have their own system within Sage. But yeah, it was rolled out really quickly, and the implementation was surprisingly pain-free. Thanks, you. So what happened afterwards? There was a tool with Mail Manager actually to be able to migrate the public folders over there. So any projects, because some of our projects last 18 months, 2 years, we migrated them over. I will say it's not the quickest thing in the world, but I don't think that's Mail Manager's fault. I think that's more the public folder side. You just kind of leave it to its thing and it migrates them all over without any errors, really. It was fantastic. So we moved them all over. There was a bit of work involved in that. New starters really easy to set up. Training is minimal, really. It's right-click on an email, or there's multiple ways of filing an email. Right-click on an email, go through the menu, or even drag it into the shortcuts that are set up. Much easier to access the project and estimating correspondence with the search tool, which is really powerful, really useful. And then the email structure previously was removed and stuck on an archive. So we didn't move everything over. Anything that was in progress, we moved over to Mail Manager. The rest of it was archived. Remote access, because it's cloud-based, was much more easy. And actually, people who had the 5,000 or whatever emails, the poor filers, as we'll call them, they actually took a couple of hours to go through all their emails and file them using Mail Manager. It was really, really quick. And email filing across the business went from being a complete pain to being just something that was so easy to do. It just became second nature. As you can see, our team was really happy at the bottom of the page. Thanks, you. So at the moment, we've got approximately 60 users. We haven't got the full team on there. Not all the team use email. We've got quite a large field-based service team. They don't use it, but we've got 120 people in the business now, so approximately half are using Mail Manager. We've been bringing more teams into it as and when necessary, but actually the teams we've got in it at the moment are the ones that we need to get the emails filed in. At the moment, we've got over 100 projects have been run through Mail Manager. We do anything from a really small project up to our largest project, as you can see there, is 15.6 million. It's much easier to access project and estimating correspondence. And because it's done through SharePoint sites with restricted access, you can actually restrict who has access to that correspondence as well. So the restriction on certain aspects of information is really simple as well, because you're doing it through SharePoint, which has inherent restriction on access. All team members find the system a breath of fresh air, but in particular the ones who were around when we had the public folder system. So actually the change management was like leaning against an open door. And I would imagine there's quite a few people on the call who were here because they're going through the same kind of pain that I went through. And really, once people got to grips with how simple the process was, it was really, really, there was no change to manage. Well, there was change to manage, but there was no dissenters or anything like that. We really felt it was the right thing to do at the right time. So finding the relevant information on existing projects was much easier. And moving to Mail Manager was widely regarded as one of our most beneficial implementations of a new system, because it was so simple and it made everyone's life so much easier. Thanks, you. and that's the end of it. I haven't really got much more to say about it. It came along at the right time. It really was really quite simple to implement and has made our lives much easier.
Great, perfect, Mark. And yeah, I remember very similarly that kind of it seemed a very obvious choice for yourselves and seemed to kind of really benefit you straight away. And I really appreciate you kind of running us through that. As it says on the screen, this is kind of a bit of a slot we've kind of set aside for any questions. So please do use the Q&A function within Zoom to send any questions across. The first question I always like to ask on one of these meetings is, if you had your time over again, is there anything that you would have done slightly differently in terms of how the process was managed with the implementation?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you don't want to rush these things with any system, no matter how simple it is. You want to follow a process of implementation. We wrote our own process. We wanted to trial it on one job and then 3 jobs of varying sizes, and then a couple of proposals. In hindsight and 2020 vision, we probably would have rolled it out quicker. You know, the caution was perhaps.
Hi, Mark, you still there?
Sorry about that. I dropped off for a second. So I don't know where I got up to, but the caution we put in the process, we wouldn't need to do much caution. With 2020 vision, we would probably implement it a bit quicker, actually.
Okay, perfect. So there's a couple of questions that are coming from people. So the first one was, how long did your team take to become comfortable using Mail Manager?
It really was as simple as I sat down with all the individual teams. So the design team, we've got about 15 people, and sat down with them, and it took about an hour to just show them what to do. So within a week, I'd fielded all the questions from them, and it really is quite simple. So an hour's training session, and then a week of just being available for the odd question of, can you just remind me what we do with this, what we do with that. The proposals team took a little bit longer because the proposals team set the actual folders up and things like that. So it took them a little bit longer to get to grips with setting a folder up, how it needed to be structured, and then how they moved it across to the projects team. So maybe an extra week on top of that from the complexity, but really simple interface. Really, so it's not. It didn't take long to implement at all.
Perfect. And just kind of to add on to that question, we always hear companies are kind of concerned about potential problem users or kind of people they're most concerned about. Did you have any people that you were worried about how they would take to Mail Manager, and how did they kind of take to it?
The ones I was worried about were the ones who were particularly poor at filing in public folders. You know, some people were quite anal about it. They would get in the morning and they'd read their emails and then file them. And there was other people who just dealt with them. And if it was not in bold, it was just sat there. They were the ones I was worried about. But because it was so simple, and they didn't resist it. It was like, all right, I've always wanted to file my emails, but it's always been at the bottom of my list. But because it was quite simple, they just did it. So it was, it was quite nice to see that, really.
Perfect. And I think that kind of joins on to Ed's, I think it's more of a comment than a question, that sounds great, but I work in an environment of engineers who hate change, and they're he's worried about them complaining. Was that a concern before you rolled it out?
It was a concern, but I knew that the current system was it was too clunky, and it was really creaking, and it was becoming too difficult, and we couldn't archive things, and you know, we're engineers as well, and we understand the need to keep your communication and have it easy to find from a design perspective, from a commercial perspective, from a finance perspective, from just health and safety perspective. You need to find what was discussed 6-12 months ago, and you need to make it as simple as possible to do that. So once we've shown everyone the interface and the search function and said, look, this is what you've got now compared to what you had previously, get on board. Why are you not going to get on board? It's going to make your life easier.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it's kind of more like making sure that they are aware of why they're doing it, and then
Yeah.
they should be doing it. This is going to perfect. So one from Oscar, which I'll take. Have you integrated Mail Manager to other systems other than SharePoint storage? Yes, there's lots of different places where you can store your information. It's not just SharePoint, it's all Office 365 storage. As Mark mentioned, there's an option to file to a traditional file server. We operate with other cloud-based file systems such as Ignite, and then project management systems such as ProjectWise, Procore, Synergy. So there's a whole host of places where you can put your information. What I would recommend, Oscar, at the end of the meeting, I'll kind of share my contact details. So please feel free to reach out and I can kind of run you through the different options and understand how your IT infrastructure is set up at the moment, just to make sure that we find the best option for yourselves. One question which is one I hadn't really thought about previously, but do you have the problem with too much information being within the search when you're kind of going to search for emails, Mark?
No, because there's lots of filters on there. So you can have who's it from, who's it to, in what time frame was it. You can put keywords in there specific, obviously a specific project. We've never found that you get too much. With the right amount of filters in there, you can drag it down to probably 3, 4, 5 emails. And it does show you in order of what. There's some quite good AI I understand behind it that puts them in order of priority and relevance. So it is a powerful search function. That was a bit of a challenge of ours because we did have individual folders for each type of. So we'd have financial, commercial, design and installation, all that kind of thing. We'd have separate folder for it, and it was a bit of a change to go through just one folder for that project. So, but it works, and because of the searches, you don't need the individual folders because you can search from the body of the email or the title or whatever. It works really well.
Perfect. And I think that kind of leads on to another question that someone's mentioning, that how easy is it to retrieve the correct relevant emails when people aren't using the right email subject lines? And I think that's to your point around the amount of different filters that you have. You're not just relying on those subject lines to search for them.
Yeah.
One question or two questions from Ed. The first one I'll take, the second one I'll pass on to yourself, Mark. So the first one, we have lots of small projects rather than a few large projects. Is IT going to be required to make all the connections folders, or is it something our admin can do when they open projects? Great question. So the way that our folder creation works is there's two different options. There's one where we can kind of automate it, where as soon as a project's added to SharePoint, your server, wherever you're filing to, we can write a script so Mail Manager can recognize that, and it's added as a potential filing location for your end users. Or you can have your admin team simply right-click on the folder you want to add, and it's added for all your users really quickly and easily. Similar to when I answered Oscar's question, Ed, more than happy to kind of run you through that on a screen share just so you can kind of visualize what that process looks like. The other question from Ed was, do you still have people who don't use the system? I know you mentioned some departments don't, but do you have people within the departments that should be using Mail Manager that don't use the system, or is that an even option for them not to use it?
Well, I did check that because I thought, well, it's all very well me coming on here and saying, yeah, everyone loves it. And if there's actually, I've done a straw poll in the office and everyone said that they are using the system. And we've not had a situation where I've not been able to find a relevant email. So yeah, everyone seems to be using the system because they all understand the need to have for these communications to be, filed in the correct place. And I think this is probably the easiest way we could do it. So, yeah.
Perfect. So a question now from Brett. If I have lots of folders across lots of projects, is there a smart way to save emails quickly rather than searching and filing? So I'll take that one. So in terms of that, there are ways, as Mark mentioned, that we can kind of bulk file those emails across to Mail Manager so that you don't have to kind of search through your Outlook and file them individually. We can kind of file them en masse, and then you can use the Mail Manager search functionality to go through those historic emails that otherwise, as you say, would that be that kind of difficult process to go find those emails. I think we've still got a couple of questions left. So can you automate for those who won't use the system? Yes, we can. So we've got what we term a filing assistant, which we can turn on in the background. So any email that hasn't been filed after a certain number of days, we can automatically file it against the most relevant file and location. We class it as a filing assistant because we see that, as Mark's mentioned, that we want to get people using the prompts, the right click, the drag and drop into the folders on the left hand side. But we do have that fallback option of our filing assistant. And then I think the last question that we'll kind of do is Mail Manager would benefit different roles differently in terms of yourself. Kind of what's the biggest benefit to a director? So potentially not one of the end users, one of the project teams, but for a director needing kind of that kind of oversight over projects, what's kind of the biggest benefit that you've seen?
It's very easy to, because we communicate predominantly through email, it's very easy to find if something's been done that needs to be done. So from a governance perspective, if you wanted to check that the RAMs had been issued in, the risk assessment method statement had been issued in good time, you could go on there and say, right, find me something. If you can't find it, one, has anyone filed it? But more likely, because people have got it in the DNA now to kind of file emails, it means it's probably not been done. So it's quite easy to put checkpoints in for yourself and just go, I'll just go into the system and see if I can find relevant correspondence. Plus, it gives you a sense of comfort that all the project correspondence is in one place, in a fairly secure place as well. SharePoint is well backed up, and everyone's putting all anything that you might need in the future for whatever reason is all there and easily accessible. So yeah, it does make you sleep easier at night, which is valuable to any director, I would suggest.
Perfect. So I think that's the gist of all the questions there. What we'll just kind of cover off now is to give you an indication as to what the onboarding process would look like. So from our perspective, installation takes around 90 minutes, where we would create a bespoke installer, and we ask you how you would like to centrally control admin preferences for your team. And then we would look to run a couple of end user training sessions to ensure that everyone is fully comfortable using it straight after your onboarding. And then we can arrange a call after a couple of months, so that we can present back your usage, so that if there are any tricky users that you think would be hesitant, resistant to change, we can give them additional training sessions or provide you with additional resources, just so you can kind of get that full adoption across the business. So in summary, I appreciate everyone joining the call today. We'll share a guide which runs you through the implementation process after the webinar today. But if you want to discuss anything further, please get in touch with myself, and my contact details are here. Or if you're talking to somebody at Mail Manager already, please feel free to reach out after this meeting today and ask them any questions that they have. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. And again, thanks again for Mark, for the reason people did come today, for hearing through your experiences. It's been really useful. I've learned a lot myself as well. So I found it personally really useful. So appreciate everybody joining, and hopefully I'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks, you.